So, hi everyone. Today we're going to start with social emotional development in early childhood. So it's our last developmental domain before we go into middle childhood. But there's so many things happening in the social realm for young children that it's important to understand this because of the changes that occur in middle childhood. So one of the big social emotional milestones is how children are interacting with each other, how children are interacting with their friends, their peers. So at 3 years old is really when they start to show affection for friends. They start to consider the idea of a best friend or somebody that they really enjoy. They get really excited when they see them. They're also starting to understand a really wide range of emotions, which helps because they're going to transition to a point where they're understanding other people's emotions. And in order to do that successfully, it's really important to understand their own emotions. And along with that, they're starting to understand concepts like mine and his and hers because they're engaging in this collaboration, especially in play, right? If you have a bunch of 3-year-olds playing with blocks, that's my block. And if a teacher comes in, oh, actually, that's her block. And so it's really important for them to understand these concepts and practice these concepts. Once they get to 4 years old, they're really getting more abilities in their cognition. And so you see their creative play and their pretend play really grow and expand. But still, they're not able to tell between what's real and what's make-believe. And so this is really important to consider when you're thinking of what children see on TV, because if children are watching something on TV and there's this big green monster, it's really difficult for them to know that that monster is not going to be running down the street in their neighborhood. They're not really sure if that's real or if that's something that's just made up. But once they get to 5 years old, they have a better understanding of the difference between the two. They also really want to please their friends and be like their friends. So if you've ever seen 5-year-olds, especially when they're transitioning into kindergarten, and if they have the same color shirt, oh, we're both wearing red shirts, we're the same, and they get really excited. It's this idea and excitement of sameness. So I will let you watch this video on your own time, but I love this story about these two 5-year-old little boys who wanted to trick their kindergarten teacher. And so one of the little boys said, I'm going to shave off all my hair so that the teacher can't tell us apart. And so they wanted to look the same, and they thought they were being so tricky and couldn't wait to go to school the next day so that their teacher wouldn't know who was who, and they were going to tell the teacher that they were each other's name, but they wanted to look the same. So I really love this story, and it's a perfect example of this process in early childhood. They're also starting to show a lot more independence. And while they can be more cooperative, they're still in that early childhood stage. So there's some times when that egocentrism kind of sneaks out and they're really demanding as well. And then they remember, oh yeah, I can do this. I can be cooperative. I can wait. Those are things that are starting to develop. Okay, so there's something called interactionism, and there's two theorists that talk about the concept of self-concept. So Cooley and Mead are the two theorists that the textbook focus on. And Cooley talks about this concept known as the looking glass self. And this is really interesting to think about because what he says is, I believe that children are forming this foundation of understanding about themselves using the opinions of others. So when a parent or a teacher or a caregiver says, don't touch the outlet, that's bad. Well, that child is saying, oh, okay, well, that's bad, and maybe I'm bad. So they start to internalize a lot of these concepts, these self-concept ideas. And then when they're thinking about how other people see them, they're saying, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm bad, or I'm not good at that because I got in trouble. And so they're starting to filter the ideas about themselves through the opinions of other people. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that? No. So what's really fascinating about this is we see evidence of this into adulthood. So think about how if you're more secure, you have a more secure self-concept, you're less focused on the views of others on our abilities. So if you are raised in an environment where you are encouraged and you are told that you're able to do stuff, and then you're actually given the opportunity to be successful at things, then as you get older, you have such a secure self-concept, you have an idea of yourself as capable, that it really doesn't matter as much what other people say, because you have that really healthy foundation and understanding of who you are. Mead says that there's different parts of yourself. There's an I versus a me part. And so the I part, the social sense of self develops once children begin receiving feedback from a significant other. So that me part is what is filtered, like Cooley says, through the judgments of others. So they're engaging with other people around them, and it's especially important to think about how the caregiver responds and how the teacher interacts. So if you've ever seen a child who grows up and thinks they're not good at school or they're not smart, chances are early on somebody told them that they were bad at something. Somebody told them that they just weren't able to do that, or made them feel badly about making a mistake. And when that happens, it can lead all the way into middle childhood and adolescence, because it's that foundation of self-concept. Any questions about that? Okay, keep going. What's amazing about children is they have this exaggerated sense of self. So most preschoolers feel pretty strongly about who they are. And they're looking for validation from other people. So, did you see my jump, teacher? I jumped the highest. Did you see how fast I run? I'm the fastest of everybody. So if you've ever seen or worked with a preschooler, they're always looking for validation that they're the best. And they have this really exaggerated sense of how great they are, which is good. We want children to be really positive about their abilities. Once they get older into middle school, they start to have a more realistic sense of self. We're hoping that it's still a positive, realistic sense of self and not a negative sense of self, but more times than not, children will start to, again, filter their ideas of themselves through other people and what they've learned. And so if they aren't getting positive messages early on, you're going to, again, see those effects later on in life. So self-concept is different than self-esteem. So self-concept is, what do I know about myself? Children use a categorical self to describe their self-concept. So these are, I'm a boy, I have black hair, I'm 3 feet tall, I have a sister. So they're using these very basic descriptors as your self-concept. Or self-esteem is, this is how I feel about myself. So self-concept is, this is what I know about myself. Self-esteem is, this is how I feel about my self-concept. So it's judgments about your self-concept. Okay. Questions about the difference between the two? Okay. Oh, self-control. Has anyone ever seen the marshmallow test? Okay, then I really want you to watch this video when we get out of this recording. It is so entertaining to see this test of self-control and how from one child to another child it can differ. Oh, good. Abby has seen it. It is really, really interesting to watch. So there's different concepts of self-control. So the first one is response initiation. And what that looks like is I need all the information. So what's going to happen if I do this? What is the potential response? If I go onto the counter and steal the cookies that my mom just said I couldn't have, what's going to happen? And so that ability for that child to make a decision before they act is called the response initiation. So thinking about all the information, all the possibilities before they act. Response inhibition is the ability to stall behavior or to say, I'm going to steal this cookie anyway. My hand's in the cookie jar, but I realized, oh, this is probably not the best idea. I'm going to put the cookie back and I'm going to go sit down, which is hard. That's a really hard thing to do for a young child. Delayed gratification really requires a lot of cognition, because what they're having to do is see something that they want in front of them and wait to enjoy it with the hope of getting something more afterwards. And that's what's happening with the marshmallow test. So I believe in this test, there's 4 different children, and they put a marshmallow in front of them and say, okay, this is a marshmallow, you're welcome to eat it now, but if you wait, then when I come back, you can get 2. And so they leave the children in the room alone with the marshmallow, and they leave them in there for 15 minutes. And these are young children, 5, 6-year-old children, and you can see how difficult it is for them to regulate their attention and to regulate that gratification. And you see them use different strategies in order to delay gratification. So you see them smelling it, you see them touching it and poking it, you see them kind of playing with it, doing everything but eating it, because they need to do something in order for them to wait. It's hard for them to wait. So it really is interesting to see that the children who were able to wait longer actually showed greater academic skills in elementary school. And so they're seeing an actual effect of being able to delay gratification in academics. Questions about that? Yeah. We might just finish this in 40 minutes. All right, let's see. Now, good old Erickson. So remember this new stage, initiative versus guilt. And he says that we want children to have, I always do this. This is supposed to be guilt and not guilt. So we want children to have that initiative. They've built this trust that, and I am able to explore my environment, but we also want them to have an opportunity to explore freely without judgment and criticism. So ways that we can do that is allow a child to make their own bed, but when they make their own bed and there's lumps and there's bumps and the sheets aren't pulled all the way through, instead of saying, oh, that's not right, let's fix it, acknowledge that they did it. You made your bed all by yourself. Look at that. And what that does is puts this smile on this child's face, like, yes, I did that. I took the initiative and I made my bed. And it again leads back to that positive self-concept, and it gives that child a sense of initiative. Whereas if we were to be punitive or critical, that child would lose the sense of wanting to do things on their own. And we want children to have that initiative. I really enjoy this this concept here of gender identity, constancy, and roles. I talk about it in my 262 class at length, but for here, I just want to kind of give you an overview. What we know about young children is they form a sense of gender identity before they're 3 years old, but after they're 3 years old, in this early childhood stage, they're starting to understand what it means to be male versus what it means to be female. And so that gender identity they've developed, I am male or I am female, but they're also understanding what that means really. So you might have a 2-year-old that can say, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, but once they're 3 or 4, they're understanding what that means. That's gender identity. Gender constancy is that I know I'm a boy and I'm going to be a boy for the rest of my life. This is really important to think about when we talk about gender dysphoria or individuals who end up identifying as transgender, because chances are when they were young, if I was born with female anatomy, but my gender identity is male, I've known I was male since I was 2 years old. And I knew that I was always going to be male. And so we're seeing a lot more understanding around this concept that identity happens up here, whereas biological sex revolves around anatomy and hormones and different biological characteristics. So another thing that young children are learning in this stage is gender roles. So they're looking at what's expected of a boy, what's expected of a girl, and culture plays a huge role in this. Our society has really dynamic gender stereotypes in our world. We have ideas of, especially based on culture, of what's appropriate for a boy to do and what's appropriate for a girl to do, what's appropriate for a boy to say versus a girl, what activities are appropriate, what chores are appropriate. We have this really strong influence on what it means to be male versus what it means to be female, and children are starting to pick up those ideas. There's different theories about gender development. So Freud says that it's because of the phallic stage. And if we remember the phallic stage, he says that children in this stage, boys start to be in love with their mothers, girls are in love with their fathers. And if they don't come out of that stage appropriately or incompletely, then they aren't gaining this sense of gender. So males who used to be in love with their mothers, if they don't come out of that all the way, they have less of a sense of maleness than a young boy who has completed that phallic stage. So Freud would say that they were still in the phallic stage. There's Chudero, who's a neo-Freudian, so he is a new Freudian, so his foundation is Freud, but he has built upon his theory. And he said that gender is dependent on mothering. So we see that mothers who tend to keep their girls close longer, but let their boys explore and be more independent, where they're informing gender roles. So for those boys who are led to be independent and to play and not really held too close, they're able to be super independent, but they're also less comfortable with intimacy because that mother didn't hold them close. Whereas girls tend to be more dependent on another, but are really nurturing and comfortable with intimacy. So that's what Chudero would say as far as gender. There's also the idea of reinforcement and modeling. So think about what we do as a society. I know lots of my family have done gender reveals, and what do those gender reveals look like? It's either blue if it's a boy or pink if it's a girl. And so right even at birth or before birth, we're giving into those ideas of stereotypes for boys and stereotypes for girls. And knowing with the understanding that gender identity doesn't happen until 2 years old, it's interesting that these gender reveals are happening before the child is born. What we know about a child before they're born is their sex, their biological sex. Are they male? Are they female? Or are they intersex? So intersex is another accepted identifier at birth. And this is when a child is born with ambiguous sexual characteristics. So this is a child who's born with ovaries and a penis. It is an accepted identifier now, and now that child is able to grow up and decide for themselves what their gender identity is. So instead of gender reveals, I had a cousin, for example, after I talked to her about this concept, she said, "Oh, so we really just know the sex." And I go, "That's it." So her invitations for her sex reveal said it's all about the sex instead of a gender reveal. So she really kind of took that concept and said, "Okay, I get that. That makes more sense." But let's look at things even like chores are, I know myself, girls tended to do the indoor chores where boys did the outdoor chores. So what did it look like in your family? Was there a difference in the assignment of chores? Interaction with friends. I had brothers, and they were allowed to roughhouse and do all kinds of crazy things with their boyfriends. But as a girl, if I were to go roll around and start punching my brothers, I would get in big trouble because girls aren't supposed to act like that. At least in my family, that those were the gender roles. So think about what is being reinforced, what is being modeled. A big thing in my family too that can be really negative for young boys and young girls is that idea of boys don't cry. I don't know if any of you can relate to that in your upbringing, but teaching boys, don't cry, that shows weakness, and my brothers would get punished for crying. And so that's something that really it influenced how they respond emotionally as adults, as men. Somebody had, Jenny said, or how girls can't play with boys because it's wrong. Yeah, so that separation of play even. So don't go play with the little boys. You can't, especially like that magic age, somewhere about 8 years old, all of a sudden I can't have friends anymore that are boys. And it's really interesting how culture really plays such a big role on that. Children are getting these gender schemas. So who does that sound like? Piaget, right? He talks about schemas or understanding. So that maleness and femaleness, and as they get older, they start to understand that gender is really more of a spectrum. So here's female, here's male, and where they identify might be somewhere along the spectrum. So they identify as female, but maybe their expression is, I don't like to wear dresses. I hate the color pink. I don't wear makeup. I don't want to do my nails. So some might consider that more along the line of masculine, but to that child, I'm still female. I just express myself in a different way. Questions about that? I know that's a really big concept. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Keep going. Oh, here's just some images that I thought might support you. So this whole pink or blue, we love you. So are you a boy or are you a girl? So you can see that and you know immediately which ones are identifiers of boys and which ones are identifiers of girls. Think about even young children when they're coloring, they don't want to use the pink crayon, or they don't want to drink from a pink cup because that's a girl cup. Like, who tells children that? You don't even have to tell them explicitly. They see it in their world all the time. Look at the toy aisles in the toy store. They have a boy aisle and a girl aisle. It doesn't say boy toys and girl toys, but we've been socialized to think that anything pink, baby dolls, Barbie dolls, only for girls, and little tiny action figures and cars and trucks only for boys. But why? A lot of the research has shown that actually little boys who play with baby dolls grow up to be more nurturing fathers. Isn't that an incredible statistic? So allowing our young boys to engage in pretend play with babies actually prepares them for fatherhood in the future. And then allowing girls to play with trucks and blocks and other action figures, what we're doing is we're kind of tearing down that wall and those barriers of what boys can do and what girls can do. Here's that gender dysphoria that we were talking about, and it's a distress. So it's when children experience a distress because their gender identity doesn't match their biology. So I have a penis, but my gender identity is female. So it's that disconnect between anatomy and identity. 0.3% of US children actually have experienced this gender dysphoria, and it's the preference for toys, clothing, and anatomy of the opposite sex, and a strong rejection of toys, clothing, and anatomy of the assigned gender. So what we're seeing is not to the point of what I described where the child just doesn't want to wear dresses and doesn't want to play with Barbies. This is extreme to the point where they are hating their anatomy. They want to completely get rid of their anatomy. A lot of children have engaged in self-mutilation, and so they're actually physically hurting themselves because their alignment is just a mismatch. And all the research shows that individuals who identify as transgender say that they knew that they were transgender as soon as they could talk, because a gender identity happens before 3 years old. I have a question. Does gender dysphoria happen because of genetics? Great question. Yes, what we know is that it's something that takes place in the brain. What we also know is allowing our little boys to play dress up and put on a dress is not going to make them transgender. That's something I really want to support parents in understanding, is that there's a difference between gender identity, gender expression, and biological sex. And so what we do to children and with children and allow them to play with isn't going to form a child who is transgender, who identifies as transgender. It just does not happen that way. We're not that powerful as teachers. We can't make a child gay. We can't make a child transgender. That is already there from the time that the child is born. And so nothing we can do can change that. And what I tell my 262 students is, think about, because I know all of us identify as female, and let's say that child on the playground at 4 years old said, "You're a boy." What did you feel? No, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. And it didn't matter what another child would say. No, you're a boy. You have on pants and your hair's short. You knew that you were a girl, and nothing anyone could say to you could change that. You knew that you were always going to be a girl. Well, a child who's experiencing gender dysphoria experiences that same solidity in their gender. I know I'm a boy. I know this with all my heart. And no matter, you can put a dress on me, you can make me play with Barbies, you can have these female expectations of me, but I will forever be a boy. Does that help? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And again, if you're interested in this at all, I go over it in depth in the 262 class. Okay. Now let's talk about parenting styles. I love the new research on parenting styles because it really says that parents can fluctuate between all of the parenting styles we're about to discuss, depending on several factors. So they could be one type of parent with one child and a completely different parent to the other child, depending on that child's temperament and their needs. Parenting styles also change depending on how we were parented. So what did our parents do to us? Were we spanked and that's all we know is to spank? Were we yelled at and all we know is to yell? So that plays a big influence on how we parent our own children. Are we tired? Exhaustion. So we might be a wonderful parent when we're well rested and we've had a good night's sleep and a great meal. But if we haven't eaten and we're exhausted, we might turn into a completely different parent. So think about exhaustion as playing a role in your parenting style. And then an audience. I know plenty of parents who are one parent at home when nobody's watching and another parent in public when they have a bunch of eyes on them. So that could definitely play a role in a parenting. And it can even be from permissive parenting to stricter parenting. So maybe they're very permissive at home, but they feel this pressure that, oh, I better tell my child that they did something wrong in public or somebody's going to say something. So it can go both ways. And then, of course, culture. So what are the cultural expectations of your family? I know personally, I was spanked and beat and thrown, I had things thrown at me, but I knew I didn't want to do that with my child. So what I did for myself, because I didn't know what else to do, I know I didn't want to do that, but what's the other option? I had no skills as a young parent. And so I actually took parenting classes through the Parent Resource Center here in Modesto, and they were fantastic for me. And then I started taking classes at MJC, and I started learning so much about other things I can do other than what the expectations were from my family. But my family had a really hard time with me. And anytime my child would throw a tantrum, it was because I didn't spank her. So, well, if you just spanked her, then she wouldn't be acting like that. And it's tough. It's tough to want to do different and get so much pushback from your culture, from your family. So that's definitely something I experienced. So let's look at Bumrine's parenting styles. So she has 4 different parenting styles we're going to talk about. The first one is probably the most common one, very common in Latinx cultures, in cultures where it's important to follow the rules, that the parent is the authority figure. This authoritarian model is, I make the rules because I'm the adult and you listen because you're the child. What I say goes, don't question me. I love this sign because I heard it all through childhood because I said so. That's why, and that was the only explanation we got as children. There was no why something was happening. It was just because that was the adult. A lot of the demands are unreasonable, and really sometimes dealt out without the understanding of development. So I'm going to give you a responsibility or ask that you sit still for 2 hours, but you're 3 years old, and that's not developmentally appropriate. Children parented this way may fear instead of respect. So I know a lot of my family would say, well, I spank my children, and they would never act like that because they respect me. And that's actually a misunderstanding. That's actually fear. And what research has shown is that children who fear their parents actually take that fear out and that resentment out on other children. A lot of times when you look at who the bully is in young children, and then you look at their home environment, they're being bullied by their parent. And so they're now taking that out on other children. Children also learn to be sneaky because they don't want to get caught. And that's not a relationship you want with a child either. So Jenny was sharing that she had an aunt who hits her kids and tried to explain to her that it isn't the best option. But how would I explain it better on how there are other punishments rather than hitting? We're going to go through that. That's a great question, Jenny. It really, my favorite way to differentiate it is the difference between discipline and punishment. The phrase discipline means to teach, and punishment, there's no teaching going on there. So if I hit you and say, don't hit, what are you learning? Nothing. That I can get hit, but you're telling me, that's totally confusing to me as a young child. But if I sit down and I talk to you and I tell you, I didn't want you to run into that street because I'm really scared of you getting hurt. Instead, if you wait for me and then tell me you're going to go out into the street, you want to cross the street, I can watch you to make sure that no cars are coming. So sitting down, these are children who are 3 to 6 years old. They can understand reason at this age. So explaining to children why you don't want them to do something, giving them an alternative to what they're currently doing, and then modeling appropriate behavior. So I love when I see parents who are like yelling at their children to behave and don't talk to your brother or sister that way. And then I see them yelling at the cashier or yelling at their server or yelling at somebody because they didn't get their order right. But what are we modeling for children in that? It disrespect. We're modeling that that's how you can talk to people. So it's one thing to tell children what to do, but it's more important to model your expectations because children are watching us and they're watching what we say and how we say it and what we do and how we do it. So that was a good question, Jenny. Okay. Permissive parenting. So I love this visual because this is permissive parenting. The child is the boss. Really low expectations of that child. So, oh, go ahead, do whatever you want. The children make their own rules and determine their own activity. So there's not really a schedule and just kind of do whatever's on your mind. So you don't want to eat lunch, you want to eat donuts for dinner? Sure, let's eat donuts for dinner. So really, really permissive. What's great about parents who are permissive is that they are very warm and communicative. So they a lot of times they're loving on their children and they want to talk about everything, which is fantastic. But what they're missing is the balance of structure. Children really benefit from boundaries and from structure. When they don't have that boundaries, a lot of times they don't feel safe because they don't know how far they can go without getting hurt. They don't know what's the safe place in this space. And so what permissive parenting is lacking is the balance between that warmth and communication and some of those stricter structures. Any questions about permissive parenting? No. And you know how we talked about how parents can fluctuate between different parenting styles. So I'll tell you, this working from home while I have a child also going to school from home, when I'm in lectures and when I'm trying to do grading, a lot of times I'm like, you know what? You can make whatever you want for lunch. I have so much work to do. I become very permissive. And it's not until I have my things done and I do feel rested that then I become this authoritative parent where I can communicate. We're going to talk about authoritative parenting, and we can have those conversations, and I become the parent that I know I can be. But there are times when I'm like, you know what? Go ahead and make that. It's okay if you want to eat top ramen twice in one day. You become really permissive when that's your world at that time. It's kind of out of necessity. So here's this authoritative parenting. So it's appropriately strict boundaries. So my expectations of you are developmentally appropriate. They're reasonable, but I'm also really affectionate with you. So if you make a mistake, I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm going to be really forgiving of mistakes and talk you through how to work things out. Parents will negotiate when appropriate. So as children get older, it's an important skill to teach children. I know if my daughter were to make a mistake or to, let's say I asked her to do something. We'll use this example. If I ask her to fold her clothes after I've just washed them all day long and they're sitting on her bed a week later, I'm not going to be happy with that. But instead of grounding her for a month, I'm going to say, I want these clothes folded by the end of the day. And then let's talk about what are some consequences for not having your clothes folded in the future. And so now it's a conversation. The child gets to have some accountability for their own consequences. And that's important for children to understand when they've done something wrong and that there's consequences for that. And that the discipline matches the severity of offense. So if she doesn't get her homework done and I tell her, well, then you can't read your book for 3 months, like that, it doesn't make sense. It's a punishment, but it doesn't match the offense. And there's this program called Love and Logic, and that's the balance. Is I'm going to love you no matter what, but I'm also going to teach you how to be a citizen of this community. So be a good community member. Think about others. Think about how to be respectful and how to engage in a socially appropriate way throughout your community. Questions about authoritative parenting? No. Okay. This last one, oh, there is one. Abby. I, for the longest time, got confused with authoritative and authoritarian. So authoritarian, I can't even help you with how to, because they sound so similar. So authoritarian, think of a librarian who's always telling you to be quiet, don't talk in the library. So that's the more strict, where authoritative is communicative and really wants to talk through things with you and support you when you're having a hard time. So that was my on-the-spot mnemonic device, Abby. I hope you enjoyed that. So that's just something that can help you remember the difference between the two. You're welcome, Abby. Okay, so uninvolved parenting, we're seeing a lot more of that. And especially with this influx of technology, you're seeing parents who are more focused on their electronics than their child. My least favorite thing to see is when a child is trying so hard to communicate, mommy, look at my picture. And the parents say, pretty. Oh, this is my phone. No, here we go. Oh yeah, I see it, nice. So it's not really an interaction. It's here's my phone. This is more important to me than what my child is coming to me with. And this is when children are starting to see whether or not their parent is going to care, whether it's important for them to share about their school with their caregiver. Um, so it could be more a rejecting or neglectful relationship as well. So in the most extreme cases, it's I don't take care of your basic needs as a parent. I don't have food in the house. Um, I don't have, I don't engage with you at all. You don't get any intellectual stimulation. And children who live with uninvolved parents, they suffer in school and they have a really difficult time with relationships with their peers because they've never practiced in a relationship with their caregivers and that trusting, safe relationship. That's uninvolved parenting. Um, the other theorist, Lemasters and Dufresne, they talk about parenting almost in comparison to like different members of the community. So I'll go through them with you. So the first parent I can really understand because this was my mother and she's amazing. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love my mother. But she's the martyr. So she would do so much and see, look at how much I'm doing for you. And then if we misbehaved, it would be guilt trip forever. So I can't believe you did this. I do so much for you. I sacrifice all my time. I work so hard and then you don't listen. And so she was definitely that martyr. And so what children learn is to be dependent on that caregiver and also to manipulate. And because that was very manipulative to use what her responsibility was as a caregiver to use it against the child. So, you know, I don't have to do this for you, but I do. And here you are treating me with disrespect. So that was my parent, absolutely. And I have to work really hard to not do that with my child because again, that's what was fed to me as a young child. It sounds like your Aunt Jenny. I bet you there's so many people you can think of right now that do that with their children for sure. So the PAL, this is similar to that permissive parent. We see this a lot with parents who are separated, and it's really important for them that their child like them instead of the other parent. And so they'll give their children whatever they want. There's no rules, there's no boundaries. You might have heard the term Disneyland dad. So anytime you're with me, it's all fun and games, not like your mom's house. It has all these rules. And so that's the PAL. I just want to be your friend. But children who are involved in that kind of parenting may have very little self-discipline, and where they're testing limits is with others. They test limits at school, they test limits with their friends because they don't have any limitations at home. The third one is the police officer or drill sergeant. And this is that authoritarian parenting style. And it's the same consequence. So the child is going to have displaced resentment. And a lot of times where they place it is with other children. They take all the hurt that they're feeling and they put it on other children who are more vulnerable than they are. The fourth one is the teacher or the counselor. And you might think, oh, perfect, teachers, right? That sounds like the perfect parent. But what Lemasters and Dufresne say are these are the parents who read all the expert books. So do all the blogs, read all the social media, and watch all of the expert talk shows and say, okay, this is what I have to do in order to have a perfect child. And so their goal is perfection, which is not appropriate. Especially when you're overdoing something. So if an expert, I think your book talks about, if an expert says, make sure you give your child a lot of positive feedback. Well, a parent might misconstrue that, and everything that child does, they're saying, good job, way to go. And like the child scribbles on a paper, they're like, that's beautiful, you work so hard. And then what we're doing is teaching children, giving children a really false sense of what hard work is. And that is damaging in itself. So even though the intention of the teacher, counselor, parent is good, the outcomes might not be. What Lemasters and Dufresne say is the ideal form of parenting is the athletic coach. And I know when I read that, I was like, some of my coaches were not great. And they were kind of mean. But what they're referring to is that ability to not do for the child, but instead talk children through doing for themselves. So instead of for example, if my daughter came home saying, so-and-so was mean to me, instead of saying, well, let me call her mother and let me talk to her and tell her not to be mean to you, I would talk her through it and say, well, what happened? Oh yeah, that sounds really tough. What are some things that you can do when you go back to school tomorrow? So that what that does is that puts it back on the child, and it teaches them so much more independence and creates a capable child that can do things for themselves and not so much dependence on the caregiver to solve problems for them. Questions about these 5 parenting styles? Let's talk about spanking. So spanking is still fairly common in the United States, even though it's illegal and borderlines abuse in many areas. There's no real definition between spanking and physical abuse, and there's this gray area. So when does spanking become abuse? And some people will say, well, it's when you leave a mark, or it depends where you spank the child. If you spank them on the hand, it's okay, but if you spank them on the bottom, it's not okay. So there's not really any definition. Yeah. So Rania says sometimes we're all guilty of this. Absolutely. So I tell my students all the time, I am not perfect. And I will never forget when my child was 3 years old and I laid her down for a nap and she did not want to take a nap and she kicked me in my face. And my automatic reaction was to spank her butt. And I felt really guilty about that afterwards. But I am human and we are all human. And what it taught me is that I was reactive. That was not about her or teaching her anything. That was me being angry at the situation. I was mad. I got kicked in the face and I needed to get that anger out. I didn't beat her. I just spanked her on the bottom once, but I realized I didn't teach her anything. There was nothing in that interaction that supported her learning. That was all about me and my emotions at that time. And so once I kind of came to terms with that, it really changed how I respond and how quickly I respond. So if I'm mad or angry at a situation, I take a time out and I tell her, I'm really upset right now. I need to go take a break before I say or do something I'm going to regret. And she understands that, ooh, no, mom's really mad now. But I learned how to pause before I react. And if you think about spanking, think about what are you feeling in that moment when you spank. A lot of times it's I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and you just made me mad. So remember that we're trying to discipline children and not punish. So what the research found is that children who are spanked end up showing a lot more aggressive behaviors, and showed that even if there's no differentiation between spanking and physical abuse, the effects of spanking mimic the effects of physical abuse. One study showed that for maternal spanking at age 5, it's associated with higher levels of aggression at age 9. When it's paternal spanking at age 5, it's actually associated with lower receptive vocabulary at age 9. So it's influencing even language, spanking does. What the Center for the Rights of Young Children, what they're finding is that spanking actually violates the basic human rights of children. Think about it. I will never forget the day I realized I can run from my mom when she tried to spank me. Because when you're young, your mom says, come here so I can spank you. And you're like, okay, I'm coming here, spank me. And then the day I found out, oh, I can run. I don't like this. I got it even worse when she caught me, but I realized really quickly that spanking was not good. It didn't feel good. It didn't teach me anything. And so children know this. And so it's time for us to understand that spanking does violate their rights to not feel harmed. Questions about spanking? Nope. Keep going. So what do you do instead? That's the big question. Is it, especially if you're raised with spanking and that's what you know to do, to stop spanking is scary because if you don't have any other tools, it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? I don't want to be a permissive parent. So what are the next steps? Jenny was sharing that her little cousin used to tell his mom, it didn't hurt me, and he would run after. Yes. So my mom actually shared with me that when she used to get spanked, she wouldn't cry. And that was her kind of standing up to her dad, is she just wouldn't cry. And he would spank her and try and make her cry, spank her pretty hard, and she just wouldn't cry. She was that stubborn. And she would say the same thing, it didn't hurt, it didn't hurt. And so what children are doing when they're getting spanked is not thinking, oh wow, I shouldn't have done that. They're thinking, I'm going to get you back one day, and I'm going to do something that's really going to make you mad. So again, it's not teaching children anything. So alternatives: praising and modeling appropriate behavior. So I'd like to, your book says praising, but I'd like you to think about the encouragement. So instead of just the generic good job, encouragement is, oh, I see that you worked on that the whole time we were here. So acknowledging the process. Your book also says to provide timeouts for an inappropriate behavior, but I want you to consider a concept called time with. And so, because again, when you're sitting children and isolating them by themselves for even 3 minutes, that child isn't sitting there, even though you tell them, sit there and think about what you've done. They're not sitting there thinking about what they've done. They're sitting there thinking about how mad they are at you that you just sat them there. And so it's not, again, not teaching them anything. Whereas time with, what you're doing is saying, you're really upset right now. I know I really didn't like when you hit your sister. So I can sit here with you, or if you'd like to sit by yourself, you could sit by yourself, but we need to take a little break from that play. And so what that does is show the child that my relationship with you is still intact. I still love you. I'm still here with you, but it is time to take a break. So it's more supporting the child and stepping away from what was upsetting them at the moment. Check the chat really quickly. Then what do we need to do? So instead of the timeout, so that time with, being with the child. But then I know when a child is misbehaving, sometimes it's the parent that's like, I want a break from you because I'm really overwhelmed and I'm really frustrated with you right now. And so at that moment, what I tell parents to do, and what I've done myself, is to take an adult time out. So, I'm very upset right now. I need to take a little break. And so my bathroom or my closet or somewhere, I would just sit in there and take some deep breaths and just give myself some time, even though she'd stick her little fingers under the door and say, Mommy, I'm sorry. I still needed a break, because I knew that if I were to come out before I calmed down, that I would be at risk for spanking her or saying something mean. And I didn't want to do that. And so I would have to take the time out myself. Instead of putting her in timeout, I would put myself in timeout so that I could take a break. Let's see. So how old is your son, Rania? Rania was asking, what about my son in this age? Let's see what she says. 13. Oh yeah, he's close to my daughter's age. So parenting a teenager.
Yeah, one 13 and the other one 15.
So both teenagers. Yeah.
Teenager. What to do in this time,
Yeah, those are.
I go away and okay, I take time to be to collect myself first, to control myself and return back. Okay. And then what I leave him alone in this time, or what I do, what is the best thing that I do with them if there is fight together or there is annoy each other.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of different strategies for teenagers, and a lot of time it's supporting them in building a relationship together. And so saying, it really hurts me that you two want to fight all of the time. So let's find an activity that we all enjoy, and let's spend some time together appreciating each other a little bit more.
Especially in this time at home, stay at home, especially in this time.
Oh yeah, they're forced to be with each other.
We finished all the activity already in the first week, we done it all and finished all.
It's not easy, Ronnie. I totally understand that. And some of it is what I have right here is ignoring small annoyances. So if they're doing the whole, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, you know, that back and forth, that's annoying. But honestly, if I just leave the room, it doesn't bother me anymore. So just ignoring things that really don't need a lesson. You know, they're trying to annoy each other. And
Yeah.
so you can annoy each other to your heart's consent, to your heart's content. As long as you aren't hurting each other, I'm going to ignore it so that I don't yell at you. So that's something that you can do as well. And a lot of time, it's when do I spend quality time with each one-on-one. So I'm going to do something I know you enjoy. We're going to go for a walk together, like in these times specifically. Let's go for a walk, just me and you, and let's just talk and get out of the house, get some fresh air. And then the next day with your other son, like, hey, let's go for a walk, or let's ride a skateboard, or teach me something. I know right now in these times, my daughter's been teaching me TikTok dances. And so that's
Oh,
that's our bonding time. And so she is teaching me how to do all these like 3-minute dances or 2-minute dances, and she thinks it's hilarious, and it bonds us, and it keeps her calm and entertained, and it's a safe way to do social media. So really just find something to enjoy together during this time. Yes, I do know the Renegade, Abigail. Abby said the Renegade. Yes, she taught me the Renegade. And then, gosh, I don't know the name of the other one. And I don't want to sing it because then you just want to completely leave the meeting. So, and this is being recorded, so I won't sing to you. Oh, she said her cousin is trying to make her do them and she doesn't want to. They're fun. I have a really good time. I know I look ridiculous, but I really enjoy them. It's really, how do you even, not only in adolescence, but with our young children. So how do you find something that they're enjoying at that moment? How do you redirect their attention if they're having a really hard time in this focus activity where they're having to do math at home? We have the freedom right now to take a break. Let's take a break and let's go do something you enjoy. Let's do a puzzle. Let's do some coloring. Let's do hopscotch outside. Let's play basketball. Let's take a little bit of a break. And a lot of times that's all children really need, is just a break and a breather from that situation. So how do we support children in doing that? The last thing is withdrawing privileges. So if I see that my daughter's phone is keeping her from doing her homework, then we take a break from the phone. And so one of the things that I'll do with her is, okay, if I'm expecting you to take a break from the phone, then I'm going to take a break from my phone too. And we'll both put our phones up here on the refrigerator and we'll go do our work because it's distracting me from my work too. But again, modeling is the big one. I can't tell her, don't be on your phone, you're not getting your work done, where I'm sitting there texting on my phone and I have a bunch of grading waiting for me. So I have to really make sure that I'm modeling what I'm expecting from her as well. So good questions though. I have a chat. Let's see. Would that be considered negative reinforcement? Good question. So negative reinforcement is different. This is actually a really great question because it's commonly misunderstood. So negative reinforcement would be to take something that the child doesn't want to do away as a reward for something they did. For example, if I have a list of chores for my child, so picking up the dog poop and putting the dishes in the dishwasher away and folding her laundry, and she picks up the dog poop and folds her laundry, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put the dishes in the dishwasher away. I know it's something you didn't want to do, but I'm going to do it for you because I really appreciate you doing those other 2 chores. So it's taking something undesired away as a reward for doing something that was desired. Does that make sense? So when I think negative reinforcement, I think taking away the negative, but it's positive. It's confusing because it's a good thing. The negative reinforcement is a good thing, but it just sounds bad. Awesome. Thanks, Abby. So diverse family forms. Single parent families are really on the rise right now with the growing number of separations and divorces. But we also need to consider single parent families by choice. So these are families who have decided that I really don't need a partner, and I'm going to either adopt a child or conceive a child on my own using a donor or a surrogate, and I'm going to raise this child as a single parent. So that's the difference between a single parent by separation and a single parent by choice. Cohabitation is also becoming really common. A really large majority of parents, even if they are married now, say that they were living together for a really long time before they were married and had children and didn't get married. I've seen a lot of children in their own parents' weddings because they were living together first and then they got married later. So that living together first is the cohabitation. So without being married, they're sharing a home, sharing a family. Same-sex relationships now, since 2015, that all 50 states actually recognize same-sex marriages. We're seeing a lot more families being built because adoption is now recognizing same-sex couples in adoption, and all of the research has shown that a child needs a safe and loving home. It doesn't matter what the gender of the parents are, it's a safe and loving home. And again, there was this false research that was out, I think it was from the UK, and they were talking about how a child who's being raised by gay parents will become gay themselves. Couldn't be further than the truth. That research was not substantiated. And what we found is that actually children who have a loving caregiver and are nurtured from a loving caregiver, they are going to do just as well, whether it's a straight, gay, transgender, whatever the gender identity and sexual orientation of the parent is, that doesn't matter. It really is how much love and care and nurturing is that child receiving. Keep going. So what are some child care concerns? So we know 75% of children under 5 years old are in scheduled child care, especially with so many women and men working outside of the home. Right now is a really interesting time because we're seeing parents having to work from home when they and having to care for their children who are typically at school, preschool, kindergarten. And it's not an easy thing because quality childcare does so much more than just watch children. One of the misconceptions of early childcare workers is that we're babysitters, and we are not babysitters. The things that we're doing with children are supporting them in the growth of all their developmental domains. If it's a quality program, we're looking at how engaging it is, how clean it is, how safe the environment is. And so having all these children who are once in a quality program now at home, maybe not getting the same interaction as they once got at school, is a really difficult transition for so many children. When we're looking at the curriculum of quality programs, we want to make sure that they're child-centered. So the focus is on the child's best interest, that they're positive in their interactions, both between children, between the caregiver and the child, and between the teacher and the parent. And that the curriculum is stimulating and engaging. We want children to be excited to go to school. If we see children who are walking around bored, no child should be bored at preschool. Preschool should be the highlight of their day. And so if you walk into a program and the child can't find something to do, that's our sign as teachers to say, okay, I need to really make sure that I'm knowing what this child is interested in and that my program is engaging. Okay. So let's talk about different types of play. Piaget, when he outlined play, he outlined stages of play according to cognition. So how much cognition is needed for each type of play. So it goes from least amount of cognition needed to the most amount. So functional play doesn't require as much cognition because it's a lot of repetitive physical play. So if I roll a ball back and forth, if I'm trying to think of some other things. If I'm playing with a car back and forth, it's really just repetitive. Symbolic play requires a little bit more cognition because you're starting to engage in dramatic play. So what used to be my pencil is now my magic wand. What used to be my cup is now my crown. And so they're using one thing to represent another thing. Constructive play is the next cognitively advanced form of play. And it's when children are using objects to build things, manipulatives to create something. So they're putting things together to make a zoo. So I just put all my blocks together and now I have a zoo. And so now they're engaging in pretend play and constructive play. The last stage of cognition is games with rules. These include board games, hopscotch, freeze tag, and what children have to do in these is cooperate and wait their turn. That's not easy for young children to wait their turn. And so that's why it really requires this higher level of cognitive functioning. So that's Piaget. Mildred Parton has types of play as well, but her play is divided according to the least to most social type of play. So Piaget was revolved around cognition, Parton revolved around social. So how social are children? The first type and the least social amount of play or type of play is unoccupied play. Children are really engaging randomly. They don't really have a goal. They don't have a task to complete. And so they're kind of just wandering around aimlessly through the environment. It's different than solitary play because in solitary play, the child is playing. They're just not playing with other children. And so they're in similar activities, but they're way off on their own. The next type of play is onlooker play. So the difference is the child might be engaging with the other child, but they're just kind of watching the other child's play. So they might say, oh, that's a big block, but they're not touching the blocks. They're not playing with the block. They might comment on the other child's activity, but they're not engaging together in play. Okay. Let's keep going. Parallel play is really fun to watch because this is when children are really wanting to engage with each other, but not yet sure how to make that engagement happen. And so they're playing right next to each other, maybe even with the same materials, but their play doesn't intersect. So I'm playing with blocks over here, you're playing with blocks over here. We're both playing with blocks next to each other, but not playing together. That's parallel play. The next type of play is associative play, and this is when children do interact together, but they don't have the same goal. So they might, like these children who are sharing blocks right here, they might both be building their own towers, and he might say, can I have that small brown block? And she passes him one, and they're both building and they're talking, but they're not working towards the same goal, like in cooperative play. In cooperative play, they'd both be trying to make the longest train track ever. And so they're working together to build the same thing. Does that make sense, the difference between associative play and cooperative play? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's transition to stress. So childhood stress and development. It's okay for children to experience normal everyday stress, like going to a new school or mom leaves for work every day. Like that's normal everyday stress. And what that does is it gives them an opportunity to manage the stress and develop coping skills, which are important into adulthood. Even our everyday stresses like starting a new job or getting to work on time or traffic, right? Those are everyday stressors that allow us to cope. And we notice some of us have better coping skills than others. Some of us might be really frustrated with traffic and other people might just say, okay, I just need to get through here. Toxic stress, however, can really impact the child's brain. Toxic stress includes abuse over an extended period of time. So this isn't short-term stress, this is long-term stress. And what we've seen is children as young as 3, their brain is actually smaller when they're exposed to extended periods of stress than a child who's who's only experienced an average amount of stress in their life. And you see a difference in the connections being made. You see a difference in the density of the child's matter, gray matter and white matter. You see that the child isn't holding on to information as much as the child who isn't experiencing that toxic stress. And we also see a decrease in the size of the hippocampus, which affects how much a child can remember and how well the child can remember. It also reduces immunity. So if you've ever been extremely stressed as an adult, do you ever notice that you might catch a cold maybe the next week? Like if you're really, really, really stressed and then the next day you get cold symptoms, what stress does is it reduces your ability to fight off infection and fight off viruses. And so when children are stressed, they might get sick frequently. Children also have a lower threshold for stress in the future. And so they're hypersensitive and prone to experiencing high levels of stress as they get older. So stress is not good for children. So the last thing we're going to talk about is child maltreatment. And I know this is a very sensitive topic. And so as you're listening to this, whether you're here on with me live or you're watching this and something comes up, a bad memory or a situation that maybe you had forgotten about and it just came back up looking at this lecture, please reach out. Know that I can provide you with support services to talk through those situations, but I know that sometimes this topic hits home for a lot of students. So that's always my disclaimer before we get started. But know that if you do tell me something, that I am a mandated reporter, so I do have to support you. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is physical abuse. Physical abuse is probably something we're most familiar with. The child abuse laws define, so there's supposed to be an E in there, I apologize, as deliberate infliction of serious injury or actions that place the child at risk for injury or death. So what's hard is that there's so much gray area. Usually we're waiting to see a mark on a child, waiting to see a broken bone. Again, that poor distinction between discipline and abuse is a little dangerous because what some might view as discipline, if it gets out of hand or if that parent is angry enough, it could definitely lead to a more abusive interaction. So that's important to think about. We see abuse more with children under 5 years old. Specifically, we see abuse more with boys under 2 years old. And why do you think that is? Can you think of some reasons? Think about it and then I'll tell you. It's because children under 2 typically don't have as much language. So the chances of them being able to communicate their needs, that frustration that comes with not being able to communicate their needs, and then also they're not able to tell anyone when something is happening. Boys specifically, because boys tend to be a little bit more active than girls at that age, and so that can cause some frustration for parents. But that's typically why we see young boys being the primary victims of physical abuse. Sexual effects effects include guilt. So children who have been sexually abused, I think a lot of the advice I like to give to educators and to parents is that how we teach children about stranger danger is important. So not all abusers are strangers. In fact, most of the time it's somebody that the child knows. This is a family member, a close friend who's gained the trust of the family. And so teaching children what an appropriate touch is, teaching children about consent. So nobody has permission to touch your body without your consent. Teaching children not just saying private parts, but teaching children, nobody's allowed to touch your vagina. Nobody's allowed to touch your breast, because if we tell children these actual words and something happens, they can go to a trusted adult and say, somebody touched my vagina. And very clearly, that is what's going to hold up in court. When things are a little bit more mixed up, where the child isn't able to name what was touched or name what has happened, it's really difficult to prosecute some of those individuals. So it's a really scary thing. I know nobody wants to think about it, but it does happen. In fact, as adults, 15 to 25% of women say that they've been sexually abused at some time in their life. And 5 to 15% of men said that they were sexually abused at some time in their life in childhood. And so it happens more frequently than anyone really talks about. It's still considered taboo. It's considered, it's stigmatized. And that's why a lot of even adults don't reach out for help. A lot of children have been groomed to think that it was their fault, that they did something to deserve it, that they were asking for it. And that fear that nobody's going to believe them is a very real fear. I would always function as an educator to, I know it's innocent until proven guilty. Honestly, I would function as guilty until proven innocent. When a child tells you something, it's our responsibility as mandated reporters to report that. And I know that's hard because the hope is that they're completely innocent, but always believe the child. Yeah, Abby's a mandated reporter. Good, Abby. And when you go through this program, if you continue in child development, the 109 class actually has you do mandated reporter training. So by the end of the program, you're also a mandated reporter. So some of the effects of children who've been sexually abused are guilt and self-blame. So again, they think they're responsible for what happened to them. They could have recurring flashbacks and nightmares and wet the bed or cry incessantly, have insomnia where they're not able to sleep because they keep thinking about what has happened to them, or they're fearful that it can happen again, and continue to have fears associated with the abuse. So maybe they're scared to go to that abuser's home. Thank you, Rania, for sharing. They're scared to go to the park because that's where the person who abused them met them. They're scared to go somewhere and run into their abuser. And so that fear, there's very real fears there. Maybe they're scared to take a bath because that's where the abuse happened. And so really looking at how to support children who have been through this. It's really a specialty kind of support. And that's why a lot of the counselors who specialize in children who've experienced sexual abuse, they go through significant training, but it is a much needed field because it's so specialized. So the third one we're going to talk about is emotional abuse. And it's the hardest to define, and it's also the hardest to, really the hardest to catch. So the hardest to see because a lot of times it's invisible. These are children that at home they're being called names, and not just like a brat, or which is not healthy and not good to call children either, but we're talking about really significant names. They're cursed at, they're ridiculed, they're completely degraded. They might have maybe they did something wrong and so their parent broke their favorite toy, or sometimes there's even cases where parents are harming their favorite animal, which is sociopathic, right? But still happens. Inappropriate or excessive demands. I'm glad you did the mandated reporter training. It's such an important training to have. So Ronnie was sharing she did the training as well. I really encourage anyone who's working with children to do that. For emotional abuse, what we're seeing with children is that they almost feel similar to the sexual abuse, where they feel like they abused it. It completely affects their self-concept. It affects the way they feel about themselves as a human being. It makes them feel like that's how they deserve to be treated. Like there's no other way, that's the norm. And so as they get older, they begin to seek out relationships that are similar to their abusive relationships with their parents. The next one is neglect. And with neglect, what we're seeing is a passive form of abuse. So this is where the caregiver fails to meet those adequate needs. I see another comment. Oh, where can you start the mandated training? I would encourage you, if you're going to continue with child development, to wait until you take the 109 class, because it's part of your assignment. I can provide the link for it. I think you can take it anytime you want, but I think it's through the state office of education, and there's mandated reporter training for people who work with children, for people who work with the elderly, for people who work with children with special needs. And so there's different sensitive populations, and you can take the mandated reporter training for any of those. Good question. So with neglect, when you have a failure to provide basic needs, these are our children who start to hoard food at school. So they're not only eating their lunch, but they're also trying to take more food and stick it in their pockets or in their backpack because they're not sure when their next meal is going to be. These are children who have a really hard time focusing at school because maybe they're not sure when their next meal, where they're going to sleep that night, who's going to be home, who's not going to be home. Unfortunately, neglect is prevalent. In 1 year, a study showed 91,000 cases of neglect in the United States. 91,000 children not getting their basic needs met, which is devastating. We're seeing a lot more. 1 year in the news, it was multiple families that had been keeping their children home and homeschooled and not registered through the public school system. And one of them, it was like 7 children, and they were completely neglected. They weren't fed. They weren't taken care of. They came out, and the oldest one was in her 20s, and she had the maturity level of a 12-year-old because she had been so neglected. So it really, it affects so many aspects of development when children aren't treated right. But there are resources for families. There's Sierra Vista resources. There's a parent resource center here in Modesto. There's the Center for Human Services. There's all kinds of resources to parents who want to do better and who need the support, because not all neglectful parents are intentionally neglecting their child. A lot of the times they're experiencing their own stressors, and parenting just kind of takes a seat in a back seat to whatever they have going on. So I believe that's the end of our PowerPoint. I always hate to end on such a negative note. I know that was a heavy last couple of slides, but I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I will answer any questions that you have. So let me